we're at a period in civilization where everything's on fire, it's heating up, or it's flooding, or it's burning, or we're locked up because of pandemics. All this is a direct result of how we treat nature. And we're quick to try and find band-aid solutions to the problems we've faced, while ignoring a solution that's spent the last 5 billion years evolving, and that is nature. It's the best regulating system we have on this planet. We can't afford to keep treating nature as a garbage dump. We can't afford to keep thinking that we are on top of the food chain, because we're not. We're part of a system that is breaking, it's failing, and it's starting to shake its tail. And it's a system that's been around a lot longer than us, and it's a system that will survive us. Nature is not the endangered one here. It's us. If we don't understand that, then we're gone.
Hello and welcome to the Plant Paradigm Podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with amazing individuals from all around the world and look for ways to create a clean, green and sustainable future for us, the planet and all beings. I'm your host, Tom Simak, a fellow plant eater and athlete, here to help facilitate those conversations. Who you just heard is Damien Mander. But just before I get into the episode, I wanted to implore people, for those who haven't and do enjoy this podcast, leave a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to this podcast, or on YouTube. You can like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff. But it really does help out the show a lot just by doing that one small act. I really appreciate it. Now on to today's conversation. Damien is an activist and founder of the International Anti Poaching Foundation. He has a unique background in that he's a former Australian Royal Navy clearance diver and special ops military sniper. His work has been featured on The Guardian, ABC, Nat Geo, Forbes, and the Game Changers, which a lot of people listening to this show might be familiar with. He's also the recipient of the 2019 Winsome Constance Kindness Gold Medal, a prestigious international recognition for services to animals and humanity. We're going to be talking about poaching quite a little bit, and in particular the International Anti Poaching Foundation, the grim reality of the situation, making a difference, a positive difference in this world, and being an optimist. I'm sure you guys will enjoy this conversation as much as I did. But with that being said, I will see you on the other side. Damien, welcome to the Plant Paradigm Podcast. How are you going?
Tom, beautiful, mate. Yeah, thanks very much for having us on today.
Oh, mate, it's absolute. Oh, yeah, for sure. Look at this beautiful background for those watching on YouTube. It's absolutely incredible where you are. Speaking of which, I really can't do your general background justice. So I thought the best way to start this conversation for everyone who might not know who you are, could you give us a bit of a one-on-one on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Damien Mander, born in Melbourne, raised on the east coast of Australia, joined the military at age 19, was a clearance diver in the Australian Navy, and then went on to serve with what was then the 2nd Commando Regiment in Tactical Assault Group East as a sniper, private contractor in Iraq for 3 years. In 2008, had a sabbatical year off trying to figure out what next in life, which led me to Africa, and landed here at the beginning of 2009 and haven't looked back. Founded the IAPF in October 2009 after seeing the injustices done to animals and being in a, I suppose, a unique position with the skills I had from the military and the money I'd been able to save or generate through residential property investment in Australia, and formed the IAPF, International Anti Poaching Foundation. And 13 years later, we've trained rangers that help protect over 20 million acres of wilderness across the continent. We have a staff of over 500 people. We have around 8.5 million acres under contract that we are directly responsible for managing and protecting. And onwards and upwards, it's been one hell of a ride.
Mate, there is so much we can jump in there. I actually didn't know you were born in Melbourne, so that's an awesome surprise.
Mornington boy. Yeah.
Oh, you're Mornington. Wow. Okay, so you're
Mornington.
a
So if I
little bit
say
snobby.
during the session, you'll probably
You
go,
don't. You
oh yeah,
don't.
he's from Mornington.
Ah, yeah. I didn't get the snobby vibe from you actually.
I
So
was from Mornington when Mornington was still a little fishing village.
really,
Before it went all cafe latte.
to be fair, Mornington has some great vegan places now, so I can't give them
Yeah,
too much crap.
yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Um, so most of the community, that's an incredible story, and most of the community here probably knows you from either IAPF and the work you do there, or I guess most commonly this documentary that took the world by storm, Game Changers, right? And so I thought I'd start with the IAPF for a second because you mentioned poaching, and that's a string that a lot, well, vegans are just very triggered when it comes to that stuff, and I think a lot of people, and actually, no, I'm going to take back the fact that I said vegans do, 'cause everyone hates poaching, right? It's just a common thing. Nobody's actually, no, there's a small minority, but I'm sure love it. But from what I see on social media, what I, is just like a dead rhino in the savannah with the horns cut off. Is that actually the reality of what goes on?
So there's a couple of different dynamics working in here. One is subsistence poaching, so that's people just trying to poach to eat, to feed their family. Then there's people that are trying to do that same thing, trying to poach more and more to not only feed their family but to turn it into a business where it starts ebbing into the commercial side of poaching. And then you've got the organised crime commercial side of poaching, which is your elephant tusks, your animal skins, your rhino horns. Yeah, there's hundreds of thousands of different animal items that are used around the world. Yeah, the premise of it is, yeah, you've got something of value running around areas the size of small countries, and people that want to get their hands onto it. So you need rangers out there protecting those natural resources, whether they be trees or rhinoceros or flowers or rocks or water. These are all resources that provide ecosystem services to us, humanity, and we rely upon them. And small minority groups will try and take advantage of that at the detriment of everyone else.
Definitely is a detriment. Something I heard recently that I think rings true to this is when we think of land, whether it's real estate or generally with farming, especially with monocropping, and I think that fits into poaching, is think not what the land can do for you, but what you can do for the land.
Yeah.
And especially when it's these resources, it's just, is it like even lucrative for people to go out and poach? Like, is there a lot of profit in the game?
Uh, yeah, look, some of them are very successful and have been successful for a number of years, and that's the reason they keep doing it. They're able to evade authorities and ourselves, and build a good income, or in some cases, an empire from it. There's varying levels, and I mean it's not too dissimilar to the drug trafficking trade. Only the difference is with drugs, the damage is done at the end of the cycle, whereas with wildlife poaching, the damage is done at the beginning.
So, are you actually, when you're going out, and we'll talk a bit more about the process, I suppose, as we go on, are you actually seeing stuff like this happen? Because you're saying, actually, I'm going to backtrack for a bit. You're saying they're evading what you guys can do or see. How are they evading? Is it like midnight runs? Like, how are they actually doing that?
So, I mean, poaching is done in different ways. Some poachers will use wire snares. So these are these wire traps that they'll go and rip fences down or telephone wires down, and they'll set these loops up over these paths that the animals use to get to water points or away from water points, and they get stuck in these snares. And the more they struggle, the more they tighten. Uh, of course, weapons, using rifles, using poison darts, spears. Um, Using cyanide is a common one that we see, particularly here in Zimbabwe. They put cyanide in cabbages or in oranges or watermelons, and elephants love those, so they'll go and eat them. And the catastrophic effect from all the predators that come in to feed on a carcass that's been killed from cyanide, it's yeah, It's devastating. So yeah, look, our objective is to be able to build up systems that stop poaching from happening, and build up communities that don't want to see it happening. And so, I suppose the long arc of my realization in conservation is that conservation isn't just a conservation issue; it's a social issue, and you've got to deal with many of the social aspects that are happening in the communities that parallel the areas we're trying to protect. Previously, we'd just come out with this very sort of staunch approach. We're going to be the last line of defence, and if you come in here, there's going to be trouble, and that type of thing. And good guys with guns out there, between the animal and the poacher. And the poachers are coming across sometimes in groups of a dozen or more, with automatic rifles and heavy caliber weapons, often from a different country, crossing these borders, coming in, doing a raid, killing a bunch of elephant or rhino, and then ducking off out of the country, unseen, and back on their own territory. So, over the years, we came to learn that if we could focus on some of those social aspects, then we would have the community on side. And in getting the community on side, we had the most powerful weapon there was, and that was the positive will of the people, the hearts and minds. And to jump forward a little bit into our program here, in what started in Zimbabwe, Akashinga, which is all-female teams of ranger units. In a way, a small team of women here have achieved what few armies or police forces in history have been able to do, and that is win the hearts and minds of the local population.
It's so fascinating because when you just say that, you think armies and these huge units have political power, they have this money, but they don't have that connection to community. So when we're looking at these, winning the hearts and mind and these social issues, how does poaching negatively impact these communities over there?
So a lot of the poaching isn't done necessarily by the communities directly alongside these areas. A lot, in particular, the commercial side of poaching. It's gangs that are moving in from other areas and crossing through those communities. A lot of communities rely on organisations like us to be doing some sort of community work or employment work in there, whether it be through tourism or through conservation. So if there's no animals to conserve or area to protect, then there's no jobs, and when there's no jobs or no project to be run, then you start looking at all the subsequent other jobs that would be there: roads, construction work, working in the communities, doing various programs. We work in healthcare, water sanitation, education, infrastructure development. So all of those things, they sort of, if we can't show a positive trend upwards in terms of vegetation and wildlife populations increasing, then there's no point us being there. It's not a winnable battle that we're fighting, and so the community, they're our main partners. We work with the community to try and walk that line and get them in a place where they see the long-term benefits of wildlife conservation, not the short-term benefits of what killing an animal and feeding it to a small group of people may mean overnight.
So you mentioned at the beginning that there was like these different forms of poaching, right? And one of them was subsistence, and that is this kind of really gray area issue that I guess some cultures or some tribes hunt for subsistence, such as like the Inuit, such as the Hasda and things like this. Are you, when you're going out there and you're seeing, or even the Akashinga women, when they're going out there and they're seeing these poachers, are they staying clear of people who would hunt for subsistence purposes?
So look, the least fun part of what we do is having to arrest people. Most of the areas that we're taking over because they've been left vacant. They're former trophy hunting blocks, and so this is one of the unique parts of our model, is that we're not actually going head to head with the trophy hunting industry. We're recognizing that as an industry, it is in decline, and we are moving in to partner with local communities to help them manage their own areas and empower them to make those areas work. But the thing is, when we do come in, most of those animals have been shot out, of those areas, and that's why they're of no commercial value to hunters anymore. So there's not a lot of animals in an area that we would initially get under contract, and that's why we enter into such long-term contract agreements with these communities that would span anywhere from 20 to 90 years. And that's because, as humans, we like to think in convenient sort of 10 and 5 and 10 year like neat packages, but ecological processes take decades and centuries in some cases. So we need to be able to build the infrastructure, the legal infrastructure, and the on-the-ground operational infrastructure for these projects to supersede me as a person, my lifetime, and make sure that they carry on into the future. So at some point, yeah, look, in many of our areas that we have been in for some years now, we have seen wildlife populations dramatically increase, and we what that does lead to is human-wildlife conflict. That's the conflict between the animals that are living in these areas that come out and raid crops or kill cattle or kill goats, or in some cases people. And so that's a constant battle that we're having to fight. And we've got a brilliant team that works continuously on that. And I think, while humans live within nature, we're always going to have that challenge in one way or another. So it's just a constant. It's not something you're going to eliminate. It's something you've got to manage.
Well, is it like when you're saying like the killing of the humans really kind of popped out to me? Is it like the shark thing where like 10 sharks kill humans a year, but we kill like 10,000 a minute, something like that? Like, how often is that really a reason for people to go out to kill the animal because it's killed a human?
Yeah, look, it's very. An animal is very hard to sit down and get an opinion of an animal that feels like it's been hardly done by, versus a community that's had someone killed, or for example, last year, a chief's daughter taken by a crocodile. There's very little reason to be had in those conversations. It's an unfortunate situation, and these are the types of things that we've got to sort of try and manage almost on a day-to-day basis over here. There's often no right decision. It's just you've got to make tough decisions, and you've got to make it for the greater good and the long-term preservation of your programs and benefit ultimately of conservation and communities. They can only work hand in hand together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I've noticed actually in this short chat so far, where your mind goes when I ask a question is you seem to think quite long term. And like you said earlier, humans like to think in these neat packages. And I'd say 5 and 10 years, you're giving them too much credit. We're thinking like 6, 12 months, especially in other terms, maybe 3 years at the max. So how did you, I guess on a side question to what we're talking about, how did you learn to develop a mindset of thinking long term? Because at the end of the day, that's what makes what you're doing and what we can do as a society sustainable, is if we start thinking long term.
Yeah, look, it's just, it's right in front of us every time we switch on the news. Every time you in Melbourne, more than anywhere else, spent almost 2 years locked up in your home. We're at a period in civilization where everything's on fire, it's heating up, or it's flooding, or it's burning, or we're locked up because of pandemics. All this is a direct result of how we treat nature. And we're quick to try and find band-aid solutions to the problems we've faced, while ignoring a solution that's spent the last 5 billion years evolving, and that is nature. It's the best regulating system we have on this planet. And just if we just give nature the space to do what it does best, we're going to be in so much of a better place than where we are now and where we're heading. So I'm an optimist. I've had my fatalist phases, and where's all this going? But I like to think we're on the right track. As a civilization, we've been pushed far enough into a corner that we start to realise now we have to make changes. Otherwise, we're the endangered one. We're not at the top of the food chain. We're part of a much bigger system. We're a system where species have come and gone for billions of years, regardless of how dominant they may have thought they were. So we're not exclusive in all of that. And if we don't start to realize that, then pretty soon we won't be here. So
Mm.
it's not just about nature; it's about humanity. It's about us being able to coexist, not being apart from nature, but being a part of nature.
I love that perspective of when you said no matter how tough they thought they were, because humans have this tendency to over be overly confident in themselves in humanity. And I love how you have hope. Um, and part of that hope, I'm assuming, is the fact that you've seen these wildlife numbers, say, in your edge of the world, start to actually rise in terms of the land that you're looking after. And I actually read on your website somewhere that in the sector that you're looking at, poaching has gone down 80% since you guys started monitoring the area. Um, Now, how do you track that?
So we have a very good team of scientists. We have field based apps that are on ruggedized phones that are collecting data. All that data is going into systems that are being analyzed. We're able to see wildlife trends versus kilometres patrolled in various areas. We do transects, looking at wildlife spores, being able to count the amount of animals in different herds. We can also identify particular animals of species, especially if they're critically endangered species. We have camera traps that are set up in areas. So there's a whole monitoring and evaluation side that goes into what we do, not just in the wildlife side, but also the vegetation and the social development side, as well as our own staff, how we run the organisation. We operate as a non-for-profit, so we want to be as effective as possible in using the limited funds we do have in the most pointed, laser-sharp way.
When it comes to reducing that number even more of the incidences of poaching, what's something that dream Damien, like the no limitations Damien, has wanted to implement, but maybe hasn't had the resources or maybe the technological capabilities to do so yet?
Look, you know what? 80% downturn is something I'm happy with.
Mm,
And something because okay, let's just say you gave me 1,000,000 acres and it was going to cost me $1,000,000 a year to protect that 100%. Okay, there'd be no poaching coming in there. I'm just using numbers here. Okay,
mhm,
now let's say for $500,000, I could protect that to 80%. Okay, so you've still got wildlife populations increasing. You've still got vegetation that's protected, and you've got communities that are satisfied. Okay, you then take that. You then take that other $500,000 and you double the amount of area that's being protected, and that's our philosophy. It's not about species in isolation. It's not about parks in isolation, but it's about protecting nature at scale, and that's why we have been building some of the largest single conservation landscapes within independent or individual political boundaries possible. Looking at the connectivity of large ecosystems, areas that may have been fragmented. Think of an ecosystem as a jigsaw puzzle. An ecosystem may span 1,000 kilometres or more from east to west or north to south. The national parks in those ecosystems, they're the ones that are nailed down to the table. They're nailed to the page. They're not going anywhere. They fall under a federal system. A lot of the other areas are either privately owned or some of the smaller pockets are privately owned. The majority are actually owned by local indigenous communities or held under tribal or communal land trust. And the traditional economic model for them to generate income for those areas has been hunting, trophy hunting. And with the decline of the hunting industry, our job is to come in and basically go and sit down with the communities and say, listen, we know this industry is going down. What if we could put the same amount or more money into the local community and more jobs as what hunting was doing? Would you be willing to offer us the same terms and conditions as what the contracts that the hunters had done previously? Look, I think you and me have probably got the same sort of mindset in regards to the ethics around hunting. I don't like it, but I don't like the fact that that an international community has relied on that as the sole source of income for so much wilderness area across the continent. And we sit here and we jump up and down and say hunting's bad, we've got to stop it. That may be so, but you've got to have an and what. What next? What are you going to do with an area where you just go, okay, that guy over there, he's an asshole, he's hunting, so we're going to stop all that over there. And the money that was coming in, whether it be small or whether it be big, it was something. And something's better than nothing. So if you go and switch that tap off, now the community sees no incentive to protect those trees, protect those animals. The trees get cut down, the animals get killed, the water stops flowing, the area will get turned into agricultural human settlement, and then you have a fragmented ecosystem. So just remember that jigsaw puzzle. What we want to do is to make sure that whole jigsaw puzzle remains whole. It doesn't become fragmented. And again, it's lucky we can get wrapped around the axles here on the ethics of hunting and whether it's good or bad. It actually doesn't matter. What does matter is it's in decline. There's more than twice as much land across the continent held under communal or tribal land trust in wilderness areas than what there is national parks. And unless an alternative model to hunting is generated and implemented, these areas will be lost. So imagine if I came to you and said, we're going to wipe out all of Australia's national parks. You'd be like, well, it'd be unthinkable. Or what if I said I was going to wipe out that and then double it? And essentially that's what's happening in Africa. Nobody's talking about it because they don't have the high, the 5-star sort of tourism status as what the national parks do, because they're often, they're not on the edge of Victoria Falls, or they're not these prime tourism spots. They're often in the middle of nowhere, but they have the same biodiversity value and in many cases an even greater strategic value from an ecological sense, because they surround national parks. They reform or sustain corridors. And they create that genetic diversity across wide landscapes. And so that for us as an organisation is protecting nature at scale. And we've got big problems as a global community, and big problems need big solutions. And that's why we have such a big vision of having 30 million acres under contract by the end of the decade. 30 million acres that will be protected that would otherwise have been lost. I was running a few calculations on the carbon storage of the trees that are currently in our portfolio at the moment. This is our portfolio as it is, and another negotiation that we're going through at the moment. If you were to add all the carbon stored in the trees that are in those areas each year, it is the same amount of carbon that's released. It would be equivalent to switching off New York City, the entire, all of New York City for 191 days a year.
That's insane. So how many do you remember the metric tons?
No, I've got the calculations all sitting there. It's the same as 258,000 flights from Los Angeles to New York with a 747 with 524 people on there. So it's insane. It's a lot of shit getting pumped out there. So yeah, I mean, these areas, it's just such a rich biodiversity and such rich ecosystem services that they provide that we overlook, and so often we look at just the intrinsic value. The animals are beautiful, the trees great, or I love being in nature. But it's like, what is that service providing to us? And it is something much, much beyond the intrinsic value that we often just see.
So you mentioned before that this is possible, or at least the work you're doing is possible for about half of the African continent that are under like the tribal land ownerships. Now, what I'm curious about is this model also pertaining, could we do it in somewhere like Australia or somewhere like Canada or America or wherever else that can protect this land, support the communities, and it's economically viable, it's sustainable, it ticks all the boxes?
Look, it is being done in a number of areas, and we're definitely not exclusive to working with local communities to achieve a conservation outcome. I'd say where we are different in the conservation an environmental sector is that we centralised our community development program around women's empowerment. And women's empowerment gave us the greatest traction, pound for pound and dollar for dollar, in community development, which then helped us create these environmental or conservation outcomes. Now, there's an overwhelming body of evidence that tells us empowering women is the single greatest force of positive change in the world today. For us as an organisation, the majority of our employees are in a law enforcement or an operational role. So for us to be able to go and train women and place them, create those opportunities into those roles, it's turned the largest line item in our annual budgets, which is salaries for all these operational roles, into a direct community investment, and a community investment that's not going in at any other level other than household level, into the hands of women who spend 80 to 90% of their salary on family and local community versus a male that's generally spends 30 to 40%. Operationally, in the law enforcement side of what we have to do, because there is a value and there is a threat. There's a value on these animals, and there's a threat against them. We cut our operational costs by 2/3 because women have a very different way of approaching law enforcement. It's a natural de-escalation of tension, and it's very much demilitarized what we once thought had to be a militarized operation. Demilitarized for us means no helicopters or drones or aircraft flying over, or military grade hardware. We have something far more important than military grade hardware. We have interpersonal relationships that the women that have come from these communities, that their parents grew up in these communities, that they're raising their own families in, that they have this long-term vested interest in the well-being of these communities, and that for us is the most powerful part of the formula that we're doing. So it's definitely replicable, and we've been advising other governments and other organisations around the world actually on how to do it. A lot of people think it's just a matter of going out and getting the male rangers and changing over and putting female ones in. If you were to do that, it would create its own social and cultural dynamics that would be negative. The areas we're taking over are often vacant. They've been left because they have no commercial interest. They are in places that would probably not have had any other form of investment. So we sort of come in with a blank canvas, and we're able to build these strategies up bit by bit over time, and letting people see the benefits and then come back to us and say it's something that they want to expand. Yeah.
That's awesome. When I first heard that it's majority women, or all women, sorry, the Akashingas, I thought in my mind it's like, it's got to be based on women are just more compassionate. And I guess that kind of comes in reality when you're looking at like interpersonal relationships and the dynamic they can develop with the local communities. But that stat on the amount that they spend on their families is absolutely incredible when you think about what really promotes a lot of disease and economic disadvantage is the fact that children are not getting educated efficiently in a lot of countries, Australia included, in some communities. So it's awesome that can have such a big like waterfall effect on, like, you start with just hiring women for this purpose for this role, and then it just affects every generation downward. Did you think that it would make such a big impact when you made that decision?
Look, no, we didn't. It was, we just sort of started and then figured it out as we went along, and it wasn't, where I was going with that before. We couldn't just go and change men out for women. We actually had to rebuild the organisation. We had 2 independent gender mainstreaming audits done on us as an organisation to see, where our faults were and where we could improve. Everything from policy and procedure to board makeup, management, infrastructure. But then, as we kept building out the program, we just kept seeing more and more benefits to what we were doing. And I mentioned the operational costs being cut by 2/3 per annum because of the demilitarization in terms of what we did. So the remaining money that we had left over, we went and reinvested it back into healthcare, education, water sanitation, infrastructure development. Now it seems like every dollar we spend in the community is $1 or $2 less we have to spend on the law enforcement or operational side of what we do. So it's been a very steep learning curve for me, but honestly, mate, the best one. It's been fantastic, and we're still learning. We're still refining what we think is a best practice model. I think women, if given the opportunity, will save far more than just Africa's ecosystems. But at the moment, they're doing a bloody damn fine job.
Yeah, for sure. And something that's also very unique is that they're plant-based. Sometimes, like a lot of these communities would be at least seasonally plant-based, but when they come there, the food you serve is plant-based. How does that work?
Yeah, we've got a team of plant-based chefs working around the clock to serve operational teams that are out in the field 24/7. We've got acres and acres of gardens. We've got good supply chains set up locally and regionally. And yeah, we've got a team of women doing one of the toughest jobs in the world in one of the most remote and hostile locations on the planet. And they're kicking ass at it. They're doing it on a plant-based diet. They've been doing it since we started the program in 2017. When we spoke to them about the reasons why, it was we spoke about the ethics, the environmental component, and the nutritional component of why we were doing this. You know, that's what we served at work. And what they do back home is completely up to them. The interesting thing is through this program we created, Back to Black Roots, is it's the first step is teaching our staff, then their families, then the communities, and then building ambassadors. The exciting thing about the program is that many of them retain this ethos, this philosophy going back into their communities now, and we're seeing it spread.
That's what are some of the meals that these women or that these plant-based chefs are cooking up? Like, do you have certain staples that are just crowd favorites?
Oh, mate, geez, they've got a 2 week meal plan, and there's everything from curries to pastas to pizzas to burgers to chips. Some of these patrols are walking 30 kilometers a day. We've got to feed them a lot to keep them fueled up and going out there. And as I said, in harsh conditions, in the Zambezi Valley floor, it sometimes hit mid 40 degrees on a hot summer's day. So yeah, if you're doing a follow up on Poacher's Tracks and you're 3 or 4 hours behind and you're trying to make up that time, it's hard going.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be incredibly difficult. And I wanted to circle back to the danger in a moment, but just to kind of put a pin on this one, did you have any pushback when you were saying this, we're actually not feeding you? Because everyone has their own beliefs and biases about what we should eat. And I'm
Yeah.
sure they weren't immune, but did anyone or any part of the communities push back to the ethos of eating plant-based?
Uh, Look, there's always going to be some elements, and it just comes down to education. Uh, Fortunately, though, there's a lot of the older uh, traditional structure there that still remembers that Africa was raised largely on a plant-based diet with meat reserved primarily for ceremonial purposes, and so there's still it's in many places it's migrated to this sort of fast food mentality, and we got a lot of subsequent health problems that come from that. And I don't think that's exclusive to Africa. I think we know this all over the world. If you eat shitty food, you get sick. If you eat good food, you get less sick. Uh, and that's definitely well understood in the rural parts of Africa, and sometimes it's a life choice. Sometimes it's something that people don't have a choice in regards to what they can get access to for food. These food deserts.
Yeah, it sounds like they are putting some insane work into the field there. And, walking 30 Ks is not an easy task, let alone the 40 degrees, not aiding that mission. And you mentioned like a fair bit ago that sometimes there are this like gang environments or mobs of people that come in from a different border and they're here to take a prize. And sometimes to kind of have a level of compassion to the poachers, this is their salary and that's what they need to feed the family. So I can't really give them too much hate, even though they're doing again, like you said, we can't really discuss the ethics because it is very grey. But these women, how much danger are they in?
It's a very dangerous job. It is an extremely dangerous job. And the biggest danger isn't just the poachers they're trying to stop, it's actually the animals they're trying to protect. Some of the most dangerous animals on the planet, and in tough, hostile, remote locations. So when things go wrong, there's no ruby slippers you can tap and just go home. You've got to get out there and make shit right in the middle of nowhere. While we can hope for the best in our training, we prepare them for the worst, from survival training right through to hand-to-hand combat, and weapons training. It's not something that we hope they have to use ever or often in their daily jobs. And actually, there's several hundred arrests that the women, just the teams in Zimbabwe, have made. By the women of Akashinga. There's only been shots fired once, and they were just warning shots.
Wow, that's incredible. We can definitely count that as luck and hope that continues forward. I want to switch gears for a second to you. So you're vegan and have been for a while. Oh, well, to start off, do you identify as someone who's vegan, or are you just someone who follows a plant-based diet and ethos?
Someone that just doesn't like to fuck with animals. Yeah, I don't know how it does. I don't. Yeah, it's not really. Either or, mate. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't get too wrapped around the axles with it.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. A lot of the time, like I guess some people will be a bit surprised to hear that, considering, well, I guess we can talk about masculinity for a moment. I mean, a lot of the time, especially growing up, like I can definitely relate, being a man means eating a steak. That kind of mentality is something I'm sure you can also relate to in a lot of ways. Where does your mind go? What perspective do you have when you hear something like being vegans for girls, or, be a man, that kind of thing?
I mean, I can say this. I'm an alpha male. I grew up that way. It was the way I was programmed. I think there's a place for us in society to try and do good, with the mindset we've been given, and that part of that is to protect. And those that need protection are those are the most vulnerable, and animals sit neatly up at the top of that category. So, why would you want to hurt something that can't defend itself, or why would you want to pay someone else to go and do it for you? I've been the hunter, and I've been the hunted. It's just not something I want to be a part of in either way, anymore. So, yeah, it's just why would you want to fuck with something that can't defend itself? It's a pretty simple equation for me.
How do you often find, like, you work with communication actually a fair bit, communicating with the Akashingas on educating, or I guess educating is the proper word, on like the health, the environment, and the ethical standpoint there. Do you have like a certain, is saying like don't screw with it, is that your main, do you think that's the main way to be effective as to why someone should reduce or eliminate animal protein from their diet and lifestyle? Where do you usually go when you're starting to have that conversation with someone?
Look, it's about personal choices, and look, for me, I'm not going to sit up here on a pedestal and say how perfect and all that I am and my life choices are, because they're not. It took years for me to become vegetarian, and then another year to go vegan. And even since going vegan, I've never gone back and eaten meat, but I've come in drunk at 3 o'clock in the morning and made a cheesy omelette before, and I often think we're our worst enemies because in the eyes of many in our movement, that's just like it's a red flag, or it's like, you're out of the club, and it's not. It shouldn't be like that, and I think we scare so many people off even coming close to considering a change to veganism or even a transition towards it just because we're so militant in our beliefs. And those beliefs are well founded and they're there for the right reasons because we're passionate about what we do. But when we become so hardcore in the way we approach things, then we tend to isolate ourselves from what could be a much wider audience. So my advice to people out there is involved with the industry that often feel frustrated because we get it. We get it. But, when we're trying to motivate other people, it's like keep practicing your conversations, keep getting better at them because the truth, it's accumulative, it adds up. And for me, it took years and years of people getting in my ear and saying this and saying that, and it was all adding up and it was eating away at my conscience. And eventually, the shutters came up, and once they came up, I'll never go down again. This is who I am. It's some people may change overnight. Some people it might take a decade or a lifetime. But just keep having those conversations and don't be disheartened by someone that tells you to fuck off or they've got a different point of view or whatever it may be, because that conversation, it does stick.
Yeah. Would you say that last point that you just mentioned, is that why, like, I get the sense that you think or you believe that militancy doesn't work in terms of effectively communicating and changing someone's mind. Would you agree with that?
Look, I mean, it works for some people. It's probably it was probably like one of the aspects of it that got through more to me. But it doesn't work for everyone. Some people don't want to see that shit. They'll just flick it off, turn it off straight away. So it's varying messaging approaches. Different things appeal to different people, different audiences, different demographics. So yeah, whatever your specialty is, just get really good at it and keep doing it.
Yeah, I love it. And then let's switch gears to the last thing we kind of really like talking about on this show, which is climate change. And from your vantage point, I guess I could switch that word to environmentalism in general. How do you pertain to what you're doing as, I guess what I want to say is poaching? Is that even bad for the environment? And could you kind of run through why that is bad for the environment?
So I mean, look, it's not, for us. It's not just about species or parks. It's about these landscapes and the richness of biodiversity that's within them, the protection of that, and the understanding that the protection of biodiversity at mass is what us as a civilization depends on for survival. So if you drag that back into our current global narrative where we're going with climate change and pandemics, as I said, we can't afford to keep treating nature as a garbage dump. We can't afford to keep thinking that we are on top of the food chain, because we're not. We're part of a system that is breaking, it's failing, and it's starting to shake its tail. And it's a system that's been around a lot longer than us, and it's a system that will survive us. Nature is not the endangered one here; it's us. If we don't understand that, then we're gone.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. I want to service those who have listened to this whole conversation that we've had. They're like, okay, these Akashinga women, they're like, this is what I want to do. This is my purpose. Can someone even become a ranger like that? Like, I'm assuming you can't walk in there with your gun, I've done my jujitsu when I was 3 years old. You can't just rock up and just
Yeah.
do your thing there.
Look, 95% of our staff come from within 20 kilometres of the boundary of the area that we protect. And so, it's a very, very locally driven program, working with Indigenous communities. The best way people can impact their environment is look at the way they live, understand that doing a few good things don't give us a bunch of credits to go and do bad shit in our lives. And just look about evolving as we are as humans and individuals, and making changes along the way, continuously trying to do something better or be someone better. And for us at the moment, in terms of what we need to do as a global community, particularly those that have children or have family that has children or friends that have children, like, what sort of place are we going to leave them? And we keep saying, oh, it's all right, the next generation's going to fix it up. Whether you're 90 years old or 9 years old, it's everyone's responsibility. We all need to be a part of this solution. We all need to be swimming in the same direction.
You know what? You kind of answered my last question just there, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. I like to finish the conversations with just giving the guest the stage for 1 to 2 minutes to leave us with a nugget or two of just wisdom. So I want you to rack your brain for a moment, Damien, and I want you to leave us with your words of wisdom that you want someone to take away. It could be something in regards to this conversation that we've just had, or it could be something completely irrelevant, but the stage is all yours for a minute or two.
So I suppose the best way to answer that is just a recap of my own journey, coming from this position of, being a youngster and bullied at school, and then growing into this persona of being this tough guy, this enforcer that I had to live up to, and then put myself through all these military courses and operations to try and keep fulfilling that prophecy. To then really, I suppose, Iraq it gives you a different lens through which to see the world, being part of a system that had destabilized and destroyed a country and a culture. And just being able to reflect on what is right in life and what is wrong. And I think the ability always lies within us to do these self-audits and to make changes, and big changes can happen overnight. And if we're not happy with our life or our purpose, and I think purpose is the most elusive thing in life. Many of us spend a lifetime trying to find it and never come close. But if you're not happy with where you're at, then just go out and find it, because it's out there. There's so much stuff that can be done, and for me, it's almost like a drug. The more that we seem to be able to do as an organisation, the more infectious that it becomes, and we want to do more and more of it. And the good feeling that gives us, as opposed to some previous mindsets that I evolved through, I wouldn't change it. Not for all the tea in China. Very happy. Go out and find your purpose, find your passion. It's not going to be sitting under a rock outside your front door. You got to dig for it, but it's out there.
I love that. It is not, in fact, going to be sitting under a rock at your front door. What a lovely way to finish this conversation and round it all out. Look, Damien, thank you so much for the absolute wisdom that you have left with us today. And I want to extend a further thank you for the work you do. I think I can speak for everyone who listens to this, who watches this and is part of the community, that the impact that you and IAPF is making on the environment at large, that is most likely affecting the environment there, which is in turn infecting the environment on a global scale, is not something to be reckoned with. The positive impact that you're leaving is very much appreciated by every single one of us. And I do often say that the animals can't speak English or any other human language for that matter, so I can thank you on their behalf. I'm sure they definitely appreciate it more than we know. No stress. So thanks again for your time today, Damien, and I'll speak to you next time.
Tom, thanks very much, mate. Thanks very much to all your listeners, and in particular those at home in Melbourne. I look forward to getting back there later this year. Cheers, mate.
Hi there. Welcome to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening and or watching the whole way through. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Damien once again for coming on and sharing your wisdom. For anyone wanting to connect with him or learn a bit more about IAPF, I've left all the links to do so in the show notes. If you want to connect with us further, the best place to go is to Instagram at plant.paradigm and or sign up to our newsletter, The Monthly Paradigm. And you can do that by visiting theplantparadigm.com and entering your email address. With all that being said, I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you all on next week's episode. Stay happy, eat plants, peace.